$2 for a Kellogg cereal? That's pretty good. Hey, Mike. Sarah? Right.
Go ahead and check it out, good. Supposed to be, yeah. I didn't hear anything to the contrary. There he is. Hey, Craig.
Hi. I wouldn't know.
Call to order Kent County Levy Court Combined Business and Committee Meeting, Kent County Administrative Complex, 555 Bay Road, Dover, Tuesday, October 6, 2020, at 7 p.m. sharp. Mr. Pedamage.
Thank you, Mr. President. I just want to remind everyone that this is a live meeting of the Levy Court being hosted at 555 Bay Road. However, we also are broadcasting this via teleconference line and WebEx. And for those folks who are joining the meeting virtually, you can participate at various times throughout the meeting, and we will prompt you at the appropriate time for public comment, and we will ask you to use the phone *1 code to access the meeting. Otherwise, we'll keep you on mute. For those who may be joining remotely, we ask that before you make any comments, that you proceed your comments with your name and address for the record. This meeting is being recorded. There will be minutes prepared of the meeting, and all rules of procedure adopted by Levy Court, including the Mason's Rules of Order, are in effect for this meeting. Mr. President, I turn the floor back to you. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Pedamage. We'll have the invocation by Mr. Howe. Pledge allegiance to our flag, Mr. Hall. Moment of silence for troops and first responders, Mr. Sweeney. All rise.
Heavenly Father, we recognize your presence tonight and ask you to bless us in all of our proceedings. In Jesus' name we pray. Amen.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Please remain standing for a moment of silence to honor our military members, law enforcement officers, firefighters, paramedics, and other first responders who have lost their lives in the line of duty, protecting and fighting for our freedoms. We also honor those law enforcement, firefighters, EMTs, nurses, and doctors who have succumbed to COVID-19 virus complications contracted through close interaction with infected patients, losing their lives caring for others. Air Force Staff Sergeant Ronald Ouellette from Merrimack, New Hampshire. Air Force Senior Airman Jason Kai-Pan from Anaheim, California. Sergeant Alvin Sugranes Lebron, Puerto Rico Department of Corrections and Rehab, Puerto Rico. Sergeant Ethan Kaskin from Anderson Police Department, Anderson, South Carolina. Deputy Sheriff Kenny Ingram, Fulton County Sheriff's Department, Georgia. Deputy Sheriff Anthony White, Fulton County Sheriff's Department, Georgia. Police Officer Jacob Honcher, Myrtle Beach Police Department, South Carolina. Second Assistant Fire Chief James Brooks from the Whitehall Volunteer Fire Company, Whitehall, New York. Firefighter Charles Morton, Big Bear Interagency Hotshot Crew in Fawnskin, California. Pilot Ricky Fulton, National Interagency Fire Center, Boise, Idaho. Firefighter EMT Charles Woods, Adwolf Volunteer Fire Department, Adwolf, Virginia, and firefighter paramedic Dylan Cunningham from South Holland Fire Department, Illinois. These ladies and gentlemen lost their lives in the line of duty. Please keep their families, their loved ones, their brothers, sisters, mother, father, spouses, children in your thoughts and prayers tonight. Thank you.
Thank you, gentlemen. We need a roll call to determine a quorum. Ms. Tanaka.
Mr. Angel?
Present.
Mr. Buxton?
Present.
Mr. Hall?
Present.
Mr. Howell?
Here.
Mr. Pepper? Absent. Mr. Sweeney?
Here.
Mr. Banta?
Present.
Mr. President, roll call reveals 6 present, 1 absent.
Thank you, Ms. Tanaka. 6 commissioners present. We do have a quorum. Need a motion to adopt the agenda.
So moved, Mr. President.
Second.
Moved and seconded, Mr. Angel, Mr. Sweeney, to adopt the agenda as you have in written form. Any questions on that motion? Seeing none, Ms. Tanaka, please call the roll.
Mr. Angel?
Yes.
Mr. Buxton?
Yes.
Mr. Hall?
Yes.
Mr. Howell?
Yes.
Mr. Pepper? Absent. Mr. Sweeney?
Yes.
Mr. Banta?
Yes.
Mr. President, roll call reveals 6 yeas, 1 absent.
Thank you, Lori. 6 affirmative votes approve the adoption of the agenda. We will now recess the committee meetings. First item on the agenda under planning services. Mr. Buxton.
Thank you, Ms. Kiefer.
Good evening, Commissioners. The first item under Planning Services has to do with the county's Community Development Block Grant funding. There are effectively 2 items within. The first has to do with FY19 funding. The Housing Authority has requested the county return some amount of that money for them to use toward hotel motel vouchers. They would partner with Health and Social Services and repurpose that funding. They had originally suggested half, which would be over $400,000. After the county administrator and I discussed it, we thought it might be more appropriate if the county is going to give money back to look at where our numbers are compared to where they were a year ago. And we're down about 30% in terms of housing rehab, and that's attributable primarily to the shutdown associated with the virus. So our thought was if we were to return any of the funds to the Housing Authority, it would be 30% of it, which would be $120,600. That still leaves a substantial amount of funding for us to continue with housing rehab. It would certainly be less of a hit to the program if the Levy Court wanted to return the funds. The second half of the request is in the FY20 grant agreement that the Housing Authority has proposed to us, includes $260,000 that can only be used for COVID-related relief. So it cannot be used for housing rehab. The county would have to develop an entirely new grant program to put that money out. But the Housing Authority has offered that if we wanted to turn that $260,000 back over to them, they would again repurpose it, put it right into hotel and motel vouchers. And the voucher program has been run by the State Service Center system for years now, and it is a way to house the homeless. And certainly, as we sit right now, there's never been enough capacity in homeless shelters, and now with the virus, there's less. So there's an immediate need to try to get people housed. So staff would certainly, given our capacity challenges, we would certainly encourage, at the very least, turning that $260,000 associated with FY20 back over to the Housing Authority for use in Kent County to provide hotel and motel vouchers. I'm happy to answer any questions.
I have some questions, but I defer to anybody that wants to go first. Any questions from any other commissioners? All right, and I'll read now. So I know we talked about this a little while ago, and I wanted to do a little information finding. How timely is this? Is it something that we have to move on in its entirety, like tonight, or?
No.
Okay.
And certainly the Housing Authority would like it sooner rather than later, but it's been granted to the county. It's your choice when to take action.
I haven't discussed it with any of the other commissioners, but as I look at it, it brings to light some concerns that I have, not in performance, but in usage maybe. You know, if you look at the program itself, it's a valuable program. Not through anything that the commissioners do other than that we have the privilege of approving it, saying yes, so that the staff can then utilize it throughout the community. It does a lot of good, a lot of good. My concern, and I want to correct myself if I'm wrong, is that after speaking to you that we've fallen behind, that the funds have been allocated to the county yearly, routinely we do this, including an administrative match, and we're still operating on monies left over from potentially 17, 18, obviously 19, we haven't spent any of that.
Right, we're
So
still
I'm not finding
using
fault, I
18.
want to find out what do we need to do, so.
We typically, for as long as I've been involved with the program at all, we've run 3 fiscal years, right? We've always been running on 3. So right now it's 18, 19, 20. We think, Mike Miles is here as well, who runs the program for us. We've had a lot of discussions about how we can maybe streamline both the application process and the scope of work and the process we use with contractors to try to spend the money a little bit faster. So that's definitely our goal. Yeah.
I think it has to be our goal, right? We shouldn't be setting the tone as just a yes. Give me an example of what an application is requesting. What would an application, the funds do for a typical person, or Mike? I know you're familiar with it too, if you want to defer to Mike.
Sure, I mean, it can be any
Just
number
a
of things,
general
but
one.
Mike can absolutely detail what a scope of work can look like.
Placement of a roof, I guess.
It's roofs, windows, anything that's a building code violation, we've got to get the houses up to code. We do plumbing work, we do electrical work, we do whatever needs to be done within the threshold of the funding we're allowed.
And these folks aren't homeless or living in a home, but they're, you know,
They own the home.
the limited means, and the home, in fact, is in somewhat disrepair, and the
Right.
money helps to fix that.
Yes,
And so if we have a waiting list, especially a waiting list that's creating a backlog, so that means we've got folks at the end of that line that are desperately in need of this money that can't get to it. I'm speaking this because I want to highlight the importance of what you just said 3 minutes ago, or 5 minutes ago, which is we got to figure out a way to streamline this, to get this money out. This money's allocated, it's for the benefit of the community, and we as commissioners need to support the office and do a better job. I mean, make sure we get this money out so that we don't have potentially an entire year's worth of funding being asked back, or more. Technically, it's more. So that's the statement I make, and maybe that's the question that I ask of you is, what is it? Is it funding? Is it prioritizing? What is it that we can do, or can you report back to us with some what-ifs?
we can certainly, we can confer and come back with some ideas. I mean, right now, we've had a lot of transition in that section in the last couple of years. And while that's left us with some capacity challenges, it's also a fantastic opportunity to change the way we do business. And that's been our focus.
And the statement makes it a priority. We would look for some type of input back here relatively soon, I guess, on some thoughts and ideas. Clearly, hiring somebody's going to help.
Yes.
Right, so that's obviously, but the application's out there. We just need to fill the position.
Right, it's
with the
posted.
right candidate. Was the application just reposted, or has it been posted for quite a while?
It's been it's been a while. This has been particularly difficult to recruit, and we've tried to reach out to some other entities who do work related to what we do.
What is the flexibility that we have, and this might be for, might not even be an answer tonight.
Okay.
But the thought is the flexibility we have in hiring a quality person that can skill themselves into that position versus a person that comes with those sets of skills.
You rarely get a candidate who has all the skills that one needs. I mean, somebody should have a basic understanding of housing rehab and maintenance. And honestly, more important, be able to work with people well, right? They've got to develop a relationship with the clients we serve.
If somebody wants to jump in, and then I have a couple more, but another, and Commissioner Angel, is that right?
Thanks, Commissioner Buxton. Sarah, just a second ago, you said that it's disbursements within the threshold of, and then I missed what you said. So what can this money be used for? Is it just for construction on a home?
It is only housing rehab.
Housing rehab?
Housing rehab for low and moderate income homeowners.
Okay. So if it's low and moderate income homeowners in a community, as long as, if it's not anything, for instance, the Head Start lane rehab,
Okay.
can we use this community development, which is a community, to do the surveys of the properties along Head Start lane?
Not with existing money, but we should probably talk offline
Okay.
and see about future grant years.
Okay, so along with what Mr. Buxton, I guess, is asking for, if I'm meeting with a family and, you know, we're talking in their living room and find out that they have a back room that they don't use because the roof is caved in, I hand them an application and say, here, fill this out and get this to the county.
More important to make contact with us first, and
Okay.
then we do sort of a preliminary screen, make sure that they've got a good chance of qualifying for the program.
Yeah,
And then as soon as they make their way up the list, or two things. As somebody makes their way up the list, then we reach out to them and do all of the application materials, all the paperwork. If it's an emergent situation,
right,
we have a different pool of money.
okay. So where is a copy of that grant that I can say, look, here's what you're gonna do, but contact whoever the person that we hire is?
Why don't we get a packet of information for the
Perfect.
commissioners together, and we'll
Yep.
send it to you?
That
And
works,
that way you'll have it for constituents?
perfect, thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Kiefer. The voucher money that's also goes along with this, I was just informed today that there are some churches that will not be opening for Code Purple this year, which is going to keep people on the street longer during our cold season when it's 32 and below. Is this going to be, I know the state gives money and you say they get it faster, but I don't want to give the money to the state, then they'll back out and use money elsewhere for other programs. So is there any way that we can somehow help out our homeless section without creating a whole new portion?
We would have to create, if we were to keep the 260 for COVID relief, potentially we could create a relationship with the State Service Center, who manages the voucher program, or we'd have to create our own program. And you just heard Commissioner Buxton say that we've got a capacity issue and that we're not fully staffed. I'm not confident that we could successfully ramp up a program in October in time for the winter. I do believe the State Service Center has consistently been effective in the voucher program. The grant agreement would actually be revised to specify what that money is going to go to, that it stays in Kent County and that it's used for the motel voucher program.
I'm just concerned that, you know, with them closing or not opening, and of course the COVID-19 is still hitting us also with it. That's probably why. We're going to have people out there that can't get vouchers, or they only get it for 30 days, and you know, sometimes it's colder than 30 days. I'd just like to see if there's anything that we could come up with to enhance or make it workable, just in case, because there are people out there with families, I mean kids. They're living in cars and on park benches, under park benches, and I'd just like to see if there's anything we can do to really expedite or really help out in need when this happens.
And we could look at developing a program, but if you want speed, the State Service Center can do that. They've got the infrastructure in place. And I sit I'm actually president of the board of the Housing Alliance. And we had a meeting the other day, and there's no question there's extreme need. The shelters don't have enough capacity. There never was enough, and with COVID, there's less. And there are fewer churches that are able to participate in Code Purple. So if speed is the interest, I highly recommend partnering with the state. They have the infrastructure in place.
Thank you.
So I'm going to ask a couple more questions. I find this important to at least understand. The Sussex County, how much are they giving to the state? Giving back?
Sussex County is not giving any back. Newcastle County is a different animal in that their funding comes directly from HUD. They're an entitlement community. They don't work with the Housing Authority to get grant money.
So they have a different program. They
Yes.
apply that to their homeless. They give grants out to the homeless to stay in hotels.
They don't do a voucher program. They run their own Section 8 program. They don't do a voucher program.
Yeah.
They run a rehab program. They contribute to a number of, I believe they give money to a number of the homeless shelters in Newcastle County, but their funding structure is profoundly different from what Kent and Sussex do.
The grant program, you mentioned rehab shelters and such. So in some way, this funding potentially could support a rehab shelter? Does it have to be restricted? I know that the one does, but the COVID one, so you stated earlier.
I'm sorry, I'm not following your question.
Let me get back to the one. Well, you mentioned how Newcastle County applies their funding. It's not from the same federal government program.
It is CDBG money, but because they're considered an entitlement community based on population, they don't have to go through the Housing Authority to get the funds. They apply directly to the federal government to get the funds. So their structure is different from ours.
I guess what I'm curious about is that we are restricted to fixing homes.
Under the current grants, now community development block grant money can be used for a whole host of community improvements. We do use the money when it's needed for sewer hookups in lower moderate income neighborhoods. We partner with Public Works on that. Commissioner Sweeney asked about the work at Head Start Lane. I can't commit. I want to look in the guidelines more. But all sorts of community projects can be funded with CDBG money. At some point, the Levy Court determined that housing, or I guess in concert with the Housing Authority, determined that housing rehab would be our program focus. But you can do infrastructure, you can do all sorts of community improvement. Probably more difficult to do with grant years that are already funded. It would be part of the application process for the next grant year.
Next grant year, we include in the funding, we include in the specs, the ability to utilize funds to support a halfway house or a rehab house or something
Possibly.
like that.
I'd have to look at the guidelines. I can't tell you off the top of my head. But if there are other priorities commissioners have, best to talk to us about that, because we're about to go into developing the grant for the next fiscal year. So if there are projects people have in mind, better to talk to us about those now so we can see if it fits in the federal guidelines, let alone the state.
So in the years that I've been here, we spend 5 minutes reviewing the process and putting it into the budget. And it's pretty easy to vote on, right? It's a good thing. So we haven't spent a lot of time talking about this. I do know this tonight. I would like to suggest respectfully, right? You mentioned putting it on the front burner for streamlining and working our way, chopping wood on the backlog. How would you present that to us? What we should expect? Could I see something in a month's time that addresses the concerns? It's not 100%, but identifies where we can get better and how it's going to look a year from now? So that next year I don't have the same question?
No, I think, we've already pretty much committed to changing how we do the scope of work, changing sort of the process that we've been using for bidding projects. So it's more predictable and regular. So like every month we've got bids going out. We've got to do, and Mike is putting together a recruitment effort for contractors. We're having a very, very difficult time getting contractors. So, I mean, those are some of the basic things that we want to revamp so it's easier for everyone to participate in our program and we can keep things moving.
Sussex doesn't have, essentially burn their same,
It is similar.
they don't have, they've been able to spend theirs.
They were able to spend all theirs, and as soon as we found that out, I asked Mike to reach out and find out how. Their staff is a little bit bigger than ours, just a bit. And I don't believe, my understanding is they are perhaps not as detail-oriented, trying to be delicate, as perhaps our staff is.
But maybe the bureaucracy of an emergency doesn't need to be as detailed-oriented if we're working off 17 and 18 funds. Right? That's a fair question to ask. Because bureaucracy can be a problem in an emergency situation.
And emergency funds are a different thing.
It's an emergency when you have a hole in your roof. It's
emergencies are
not 12
dealt with
degrees, I get it, but it's still a
differently.
problem.
Yes, emergencies are dealt with differently. There's no question that we can streamline our scopes of work. There's no question. And that's pretty much already been committed to.
Decisions to make, right? So we're going to, sure.
Thanks, Commissioner Buckton. So, Sarah, you said Sussex County spent all of their allocation. Were they asked to give any back and they said no?
Yeah.
So we have an option to say no if we know there are projects coming up.
Absolutely. We do not have to give any of it back. And that question can come off the table if the levy court so chooses.
So are
and
there
then the question is the 260 for FY20.
Right. Are there restrictions to home renovations for stick-built versus modular versus mobile homes?
There are differences between stick-built modular, that's one animal, and then manufactured homes.
Yes.
We do work on them, provided they're on the land is owned by the property owner.
That's the key, because most, like London Village, 60% of those homes are owned by 5 people.
Yeah.
So it's kind of tough, because you would have to review the revenue. Well, you can't do it because the people, they don't live there. So go back to the sewer hookups. How much did we actually spend when Diana did the sewer hookups in Meadowbrook Acres?
I'd have to look. I can't tell you.
I mean, we did, Diana, just a question to you, did we use CDBG grant money for Meadowbrook Acres sewer hookups? We used it for Hartley, but not for Meadowbrook. Okay, if you could look that up and let me know, I'd appreciate it, because with London Village and Parisville getting ready to come on, those families are not going to be happy with a couple $1,000s worth of sewer hookups, and if we can use CDBG money for that, that's definitely the option. And knowing that that's coming, I'm not sure that I'd be in favor of saying yes to giving money back that we could use ourselves.
I think it is a unique time. I'm not opposed to working with the DSHA as it's described. This is me talking, right? We can all decide not to, whatever. I'm more concerned with the backlog and how we address it. That's what I'm most concerned with because of the folks on the end of the line. So I'm a little confused here because I thought I heard you say 1/3 of 402 or 1/3 of 460?
No, of our total allocation, and 30%. If we were to figure we lost 30% of productivity during the lockdown. So if we wanted to give any money back, let's give 30% of it back. And that's $120,600.
I don't think that's 100 and how much?
120,600.
Fair enough, but in my,
It's not in
it's
there.
not
We
in the
came up
packet.
with
That
that
was my,
afterward.
that's why I'm confused. In the packet, it
Yeah.
doesn't have. Who's that? Because it leaves a significant amount of money in reserve that you can still utilize for others as they come up.
Absolutely.
So I think that's a fair compromise, makes sense to me. And then the second one, that's the first question. The second one is the 260, correct? In COVID specific. And that one's a little trickier because I'd like to know what a program looks like. That's why I ask you, is it timely that we have to say yes to giving that back? Because I'd be curious to know if we could control our destiny with that 260 and maybe apply it to whatever, what is COVID specific? Saving a business, saving a complex full of back rents and stuff. I don't know what that is.
It,
And if you don't know, that's why I said
no,
we can hold off.
it has to be dedicated to low and moderate income individuals, right? They've got to meet the income threshold. It could be, we could create a program where other nonprofits could apply to us. For example, Catholic Charities may apply to be reimbursed for utility help that they provided. There's no question it's all good work. The question becomes capacity internally.
So, is it okay to say that we could hold off on the decision for the 260 for 2 weeks,
You could hold off on it for a month.
a month?
It's, I mean, because
A month,
ultimately,
right.
what the grant agreement says is that
Yes.
260 is for COVID relief. And we can either
Okay.
use it or give it back to DSHA for them to use it. So the president can sign the grant agreement and we can just keep rolling
Yes.
until we decide what we want to do.
I'd like a report, a better understanding of it. Let's revisit this in a month,
Okay.
and we'll be prepared to vote yes to moving the 260 forward, right? Or something other that we can come up with, recognizing that if we have a gluttony, we can't put it on the staff to add one more thing unless it's seamless, somewhat seamless. It just kind of, if Catholic Charities request the reimbursement of $3,300 in utility fees, it's pretty seamless because it's a organization established that's used to doing this. It's not a lot of verification. I'm spitballing, but that's a thought. So I would suggest that we hold on to the 260, put this back on the agenda in a month. In the meantime, commissioners, especially you guys that are in the city or have communities that obviously can utilize this, I'm not saying I don't, come up with an idea or thought, vet it, see if it works. Yes,
So in
Commissioner
that
Sweeney.
30 days, can we have the packet ready for the commissioners? Okay, that'd be perfect.
We'll get that to you as quickly as we can.
Problem with the packet is that's a different issue. The packet is getting somebody hired, streamlining the situation and chopping wood. That's different than the 260, which is a COVID special fund. I'm going to just say it. There's a business in Dover with 10 employees that contacted me. This has been 2.5 weeks ago. Harris School for Business. It's an absolute whatever show. These employees have been hoodwinked into working for over a month without pay. Without pay. I've worked with them every step of the way as best I can through state agencies and representatives. You know the problem? They're not homeless yet. They haven't lost their car yet. Their electric hasn't been turned off yet. Well, wait a minute. They've worked a month without a paycheck in good faith because the organization promised them that they would get back on track. They're now bleeding out, and the only way for them to be helped by this organization, who I spoke to the director, is they got to bleed out first. They got to get on CPR, and then they can help them. It's mind-boggling to me. Yeah, it's easy for me to say I sit in the cheap seat, but I would love to know that something like that 260 could be that life raft real quick. Again, no cheap shots to anybody. It's me being frustrated in the situation. All right, so good news, Glenn, we're done, I think. I think we got a path forward. Yes?
Just one quick question, and I'm sorry I'm having a hard time hearing you, so if you've said something, I might have missed it. Can you educate me on why we are at a backlog of 2-3 years?
We have always worked effectively in a 3-year cycle where we've got the past year, the current year, and getting ready for the future. I think we have traditionally been slow because the application process and the bid process has been too cumbersome. And I think we've got some very good ideas about how to simplify all of that while still meeting all of our reporting requirements to the state. But we've always worked in multiple fiscal years. That's not new. And COVID is slowing us down to some extent because we're having a hard time getting state agencies to respond and contractors don't want to work, but we'll get through that.
Okay, you say it's cumbersome and it needs to be simplified. Is there anything that your department's doing to lessen those issues so that we can get it done quicker?
Yes.
Okay.
We are trying to reallocate responsibilities within the very small staff to try to streamline what everybody's doing. We're going to look at simplifying the scopes of work and perhaps not being quite as detailed. And we're going to look at a more regular schedule of bids. All of that's going to be much easier to implement when we've got the 4th staff member on board, but that's the direction we're going.
I'm a visual person. Is there any way I can get a chart of showing where we were at and what we're trying to do so I can see that comparison?
We'll certainly work on that in the next 30 days
Thank you.
for you.
So I think we're ready to move forward. The funding comes with, Commissioner Sweeney, sure. No, the funding comes with 2 positions, right? Is that how we cut it up? Or is it mandated 2 positions? It's got an administrative match. Is it that we choose whatever we make of it, or how?
Yeah, and it's our choice effectively
Okay.
how much county money the county wants to put into it. The FY20 grant does come with an additional $27,000, I believe, that we can use to get some administrative help, and we're going to work on that as well.
All right, so a lot of conversation. I don't think we need to rehash it all. I think Ms. Kiefer understands, and Mr. Pettit-Demise, what we're looking for maybe a month from now. The immediate show of hands, I believe, correct me if I'm wrong, is to make a motion that we move a third. Is that a fair answer? A third of the money, we reallocate it back to the DSHA?
If you want to do that, I would use the specific 126.
So there you go.
$120,600.
Just say per Ms. Kiefer's recommendation. Does that work? Because this motion here is not close to any of that. Or do I just sign it and then scratch the, yeah, no, it's got
Scratch
260 and
402.
I move that the Levy Court authorize the president to sign a revised FY19 grant, right? That's the motion
Yep.
that I have. Agreement allocating not the 402.
$120,600,
What Ms. Kiefer said, to the Delaware State Housing Authority,
and then stop.
and then stop. This is not what this had, and that's okay, but I have no problems embarrassing myself if we get it right. There's no shame here. All right, we good with that? Show of hands? Thanks.
Thank you.
We have it.
Yes.
Yes,
it
Ms.
should be
Kiefer.
A bit simpler. The Levy Court will recall when you adopted the 2018 Property Maintenance Code, it included language that said any municipality who would like us to enforce our own regs in their town can make an official request for us to do so. Viola has done that. They took a vote apparently on September 15th. We got their request last week. They are very anxious for us to take over property maintenance enforcement. There is one property in particular we've actually been to multiple times, and we are set to post it tomorrow if this is successful tonight. I don't expect it to be much of a stress on our resources to take on property maintenance in Viola. I'm happy to answer any questions.
Commissioner Sweeney?
Thanks, Commissioner Buxton. Sarah, just to be clear for anybody who's listening and watching later, we offer permit management as well as property maintenance code.
We do
enforcement.
zoning in Viola as well.
And, but everywhere. I mean, we offer this throughout any municipality in the county.
Yes.
So who else do we do property maintenance enforcement for?
We've got just one other town. We have an MOU with the town of Kenton.
With Kenton.
And administratively, that's been a bit of a challenge because that MOU has us enforcing their ordinances.
Okay.
So for ease on our own staff, you want us to use our code, we'll use our code.
Is their code much different than ours?
A bit. They cover some things that we don't.
Okay.
Most of the calls we've gotten over the years have to do with tall grass, sometimes outside storage.
Right.
And we've been able to manage them. It's just to, handle 20 different codes plus ours would be
Tough.
more of a challenge than would be advisable.
Okay, so specifically to Viola, we've already done permits. We do zoning, and now we're adding property code maintenance. Does that change the whole CDBG, whether it's in a municipality or not? So I know there are some homes in Viola that probably qualify for CDBG. Does it matter if we're doing the property maintenance or if they're in a municipality? Okay, so
Not
that's
at all.
good.
Not at all.
So this is something that we've been working on with the town of Viola since April. And I'm glad to see this get done. I know they're going to be ecstatic to get this done. And will the CDBG money be used to do demolition?
I think it can be, but no, we've got our own demolition fund and we'll put a lien on the property.
All right, thank you.
Comments? I see a unanimous approval to go forward. Ms. Kiefer, before you go and I ask for public comments, regrettably, I don't know if regrettably, but Mr. Miles, who is here, who runs the program, would have been nice to ask you to come up and make a couple comments. If you chose to, based on anything that you've heard, if you'd like to have comments, maybe talk to the commissioners about the program, I'm inviting you now to, if there's something that you would have liked to have said. Out of respect to you who's administering the program, I had a great conversation. I have full confidence that you're going to get this thing rolling. Okay. But have at it.
Briefly, we're actually, our 17 years closed out. I just wanted to make that known. So 18 is the burden right now, which I like to believe that we can get most of that funding knocked out. The funding for 18 is not only CDBG, but it's also home funding, the home program, which is a little different from CDBG. We still have about 200,000 in that, and the Housing Authority wants us to spend that as soon as possible, which we intend to do. The home program is based on property valuations, so it's much more difficult to find a home that sits in that variable. But I think we'll be able to do it. As far as the expediency of spending the funding, we need to, and we're working on developing guidelines to make things smoother. I believe I spoke with you today, talked about verifications. I don't know if we can slim down our verification process because we need to know exactly just about every penny a household makes. And we can't afford to make an error there and do rehab on a family that's above income, if you follow me. Excuse me.
We raise the income.
The Housing Authority basically puts out income guidelines just about every, usually July 1st. So We don't really pick and choose if they're going to raise the guidelines or lower, the income limits. Some years they raise them, some years they lower them. When they lower them, that makes it harder for us to help families. Things of that nature, because somebody who might be over income one year and under income the next year, we have to go back to that family, if you follow me. Right now, I believe that our income guidelines are a little lower than Sussex counties.
That, you're saying we can't, right? We
I
can't.
don't believe we can. I think that's something that the Housing Authority, they've got formulas that they
Maybe we can
utilize.
advocate for it, but go ahead.
Yeah, we can advocate for a lot of things. They give us proposed guidelines every year, and we have an opportunity to look at those guidelines and comment on them. But the guidelines are pretty much standard year in and year out, with the exception of sometimes what they will do is they'll change a term limit. So whereas most recently, at one point when I first got here in 2018, they had 3 different terms. They had a 5-year lien, a 10-year lien, and a 15-year lien. They've revised that, so now it's just a 5 and a 10. So any job we do that's above $15,000, that's a 10-year lien. Any job under that is a 5-year lien. So basically, we look at their guidelines, and if they have a recommendation, or if we have a recommendation, we bring it to their attention. And that doesn't necessarily mean that they're going to go with our recommendation, if you follow me. Yeah, I think you can tell I'm a little nervous up here, but it's just this program's been a good program. It just needs to be streamlined. What we're trying to do is we're trying to bring it in we're trying to update things, become more automated, use more technology, things of that nature, so that we can expedite our processes. We do have certain situations that are beyond our control. People drop out of the program. We make time and effort sometimes to take applications, go through the verification processes, and we'll have somebody just drop out. No rhyme or reason. So the effort that we put into that is just gone. So, and I think between FY17 and FY18, we've had about 20 cases of people dropping. These are people that we've taken applications from. A lot of times we find out after the fact that people are over the income limits. So we do the best we can to help as many people as we can, and I'd like to see that continues, just in a smoother motion. So, any questions?
I just want to reiterate, I appreciate your efforts, and like I said, the conversation I had with you today gives me confidence, so thank you.
Okay, thank you. All right, thank you very much.
Mr. President, appreciate that. Are there any public comments regarding the previous 2 agenda items? Any public comments? Seeing none, Mr. President. Is there anybody on the line?
If there's anyone listening on the phone line that wants to speak, press star 1, please. We're not seeing any callers.
Back to you, Mr. President.
Thank you, Mr. Buxton. Community Services, Mr. Sweeney.
Thank you, Mr. President. Mr. Shepherd is going to join us at the podium. Tonight, gentlemen, we've had the discussion about the Goggin Manor, what we want to do with it, where we're going with it for many years now. Mr. Shepherd can probably share with us what year the house was turned over to Kent County by Mrs. Goggins herself in her will. Since that time, just let me add here, that we've repointed the basement brick, we've shored up the foundation piers, we've done window repairs, we've done roof repairs, and we did some inside ceiling repairs, and we've painted the building. We've had lights on it, we've had lights taken off of it. We have a street light for security, we have a security system on it, and now we're looking for the next level, what we want to do next. So, Mr. Shepherd, I'll turn it over to you.
Afraid to take your thunder on this one.
Sorry.
We certainly have done a lot over the years to take care of the Goggin Mansion. You said painted once, but it's actually been painted 3 times since taking over, and re-sided too by staff way back when it wasn't white. So I don't know if anybody can remember when it wasn't actually white. Bringing forward you today an opportunity to, create a future vision for the use of the Goggin Manor House. Obviously, this is a house that, means a lot to Kent County. It means a lot to the town of Camden, and a lot of people who have, been around that property for many years. And of course, it means a lot to Kent County Levy Court, too, as evidenced by all the things that you've done over the years to continue to maintain it to the best of our ability at the time. But it's never really had a long-term use. It's just been there for us to maintain, to mothball, to hope for a future use. And thanks to Commissioner Sweeney, it seems like there could be an opportunity to give it a long-term use, and that would be as in a partnership with a local church to create an Underground Railroad museum. The Underground Railroad, of course, is a very Kent County story, and a very important American story that needs to have it be told and retold as many times as possible. The Goggin Mansion, I think, is a perfect place in Kent County. It's an iconic view shed. It's so well known, such a popular park, that it could become an excellent destination for such an entity. It doesn't go without any cost. It doesn't go without any future planning. What it does go without is a direction from Levy Court to say, that sounds like a great idea. Bring back a whole bunch of more information and let us know that, this is a great opportunity for us to really put, the entire effort of Levy Court behind it. For the particulars, I think Commissioner Sweeney, should be able to talk a little bit more about the conversations that he's had with the current curators of that collection and the opportunity that presents itself today. So, Commissioner Sweeney?
Thank you, sir. So my vision for the Goggin Mansion is to share the rich historical history, cultural history that Kent County plays not only in the development of Kent County, what this house plays in the development of Kent County, but also in its part in Delaware, because Delaware was a state for 5 days, was the only United state for 5 days. And that started with a ride that came from Kent County, Delaware. Those are the type of things that we need to share with people and get out there. So I reached out to and have had many conversations with Lucretia Wilson. And if any of you have 4 or 5 hours to set aside, I'll put you in touch with her. But plan on being in touch with her for 4 or 5 hours, because she will talk. And she loves to talk. About 3 years ago, she had decided to move to Idaho to live with her daughter for medical reasons. And we had looked then to possibly move the Underground Railroad, and it just didn't work out. The church elders were upset with her and decided to pull the plug on it so we could move it. Now we have different church elders that are more inclined to go along with it. And what my vision would be for this is the Kent County Historical Museum featuring the Harriet Tubman Underground Railroad. It would have the ability to have a meeting room in space and other rooms that were set to period and with a lot of historical stuff. And after having some discussions with the Friends of Historic Camden, they know of many people who would leap at the chance to donate collections for use in a historical museum. So it's not like we'd be looking or having to go buy a lot of antiques and items that represent Kent County. That itself would probably fall out of the woodwork when we announce this, that we are looking forward to going forward, looking to go forward. The biggest first step, as Mr. Shepherd mentioned, is going to be climate control in the home. There is no heating, there's no air conditioning, and items like this need to have that kind of climate control in order to protect them. So that's We're not looking for any type of decision to say yes or no to do it. What we're looking for is feedback from the commissioners and the county administrator to ask Jeremy and his staff to start looking at possibilities for climate control, because we know that the other things that go along with climate control are going to be insulation in the building, possible upgrade of the electrical system. Those are things that are going to be very costly. And we believe that if Jeremy can come back with a plan and put some dollar amounts to it, that maybe this is Kent County CDBG money. So, President Banner.
Thank you, Mr. Sweeney. In regard to the relics that are now stored at Star Hill, the intention is to move that from there to the Goggin Mansion?
That's correct.
Because, Harriet Tubman, and I don't know other people's opinion, but I will tell you she was a hero of the time. And if we don't preserve the integrity and the time and effort that she spent handling those slaves and moving them through Delaware in a very expeditious manner, we are making a big mistake. So it's your call. I won't be here, but I think it's a big mistake not to honor her and move those items into a facility that they could be preserved and maintained for many years to come. Thank you.
The history of this house is that it was part of the Underground Railroad, and it goes along with two properties in our inventory that are considered part of the Underground Railroad, and the Hun Manor also. Commissioner Angel.
Thank you, Commissioner Sweeney. Thank you for the historical portion of that. Just a comical note. This manor is over 120 plus years, and in a time when, if we're going to look at history, it had climate control. You open the windows, you close the windows. You open in the summer, you close them in the winter. So just to say, I'm glad to see we're updating though.
Any other questions, any other ideas, feedback? Well, what we want is a consensus to have the Director of Parks and of Community Services and his staff to start to look at this and come back with a solid number for what it would take to implement climate control. And I would think we'd want to do it fairly quickly. Miss Wilson is getting ready to enter her 8th decade and need to move on this fairly quickly.
Some thoughts and ideas on what the cost and what it might look like. And I think it's going to be in its totality, right? Shouldn't it? I mean, there's more to it. It's what you said. So I wouldn't just limit it to air conditioning and heating, right?
Well, when you put air conditioning and heating in, you're going to need insulation, then you're probably going to need
like
electrical upgrades. So
right.
Yeah, he's going to find all that out.
All right, I'm good.
Any other questions? Okay, so all I'm looking for is not a consensus to move this for a vote, just a consensus to have our community services further research. I see 6 hands. Thanks, Jeremy, appreciate it. Any public comments? Anybody in the audience, public comments? Mr. Kennedy, anybody online, press *1 if you want to make a comment. Thank you, Mr. Kennedy. Seeing none, back to you, Mr. President.
Thank you, Mr. Sweeney. Administration Committee, Mr. Angel.
Thank you, Mr. President. Mr. Quila.
Thank you, Commissioner Angel. And Mark, have a PowerPoint. So we're going to be talking just a little bit about actuarial assumptions for our retiree benefits fund. I know it's a riveting topic, but I'm going to try to do this very quickly and make sure I answer all of your questions. So there's a direct line between this discussion and one you had in early 2017 with the actuaries. The actuaries had conducted a pension experience study. And you may recall meeting in the caucus room one very cold January, and you had an opportunity to talk to Randy Gomez and also Carter Angel who is, interesting enough, now the CEO of Nyhart, our actuary. At that meeting, they suggested that the commissioners adopt 6 pension assumption updates. But the pension review committee had taken a look at them and only recommended 5. And you may recall that's the first time you'd heard a suggestion that no more COLAs be given to pension beneficiaries. It was a recommendation that came out of this proposal a couple of years ago. Levy Court approved those assumption changes. And at the same time, they conducted a OPEB interest rate study. And the outcome of that was that there would be a graduated reduction in the interest rate, or really it's the income generated, projected to be income to be generated by those by the funds that we have in the retiree benefits. And as you recall, it was originally 8%. It had always been 8%, and it was stepped down to by quarter and then a quarter, and we are about to enter the 7.5% phase for 20 and 2021. Because you'll recall that we do a full evaluation of the retiree benefits fund every 2 years by Lee. So much like that experience study 2 years ago, the actuaries have recommended, without an experience study this time, that you adopt the same assumptions, essentially, for your retiree benefits fund, the same one that you had adopted for pension. And the pension review committee looked at it just like they did with the pension one, and they made some recommendations. But I quickly wanted to review what the actuary has recommended. And they recommend that you update the mortality table, same mortality table used for the pension fund. But there's a couple of changes here, which is the annual rate of salary increases. Basically, it's a payroll growth table that they're currently using. They recommend that be based on actual experience. A retirement table, same thing. There's a table they use, and they're recommending that those ranges be more closely aligned to our actual experience. A termination rate, same concept, that it be based on actual experience. And number 5, which is kind of important here for this discussion, which is an amortization period, or the policy funding. If you can imagine what they do each year when they do evaluation, they say, this is how much money you have, this is how much money you need, and this is how you get there. Well, each year for the retiree benefits fund, they have been re-amortizing that amount of money you need over 30 years. And the actuary suggested that if you keep doing that, you'll never get close to paying down, essentially, that debt. And or difference, not really a debt. So they have recommended that maybe you start decreasing that. And they incorporated that in not the one you're working on right now, which is concluded June the 30th of 20, but in the previous years, which was the 19. And the pension review committee at that point blessed that process, and they did incorporate that. And bring that up for a particular reason. The estimated contribution impact for adopting all 5 of those assumptions is an extra $426,000. So the pension review committee took a look at that, and they're only recommending that you do 5 of those. They do believe you need to do the mortality table, and there's a reason for that. GASB really takes a look at whether or not you are properly projecting mortality. And they explain that eventually the auditors will note that we're using a very old mortality table, and it will probably result in a note in your financial statement that you're using, I'll say, inadequate numbers for your projection of liability. The committee also recommended that the termination rate table be based on actual experience. And finally, of course, since they had already authorized it in a sense, that the employer funding policy be approved. The estimated impact on that would be about $236,000 more beginning in FY22, the budget. And And now I'm to questions. If there's any questions that I can answer related to this, I'd be happy to do so.
I mentioned it, and I have no shame. I'll ask questions at the risk. A bit silly, just to make sure that I leave here in the last round, which means that we're not going with the full boat of recommendations, but we're going with a limited one. And as I understood it, the Pension Review Committee, no one objected to that change. It was telling, though, was there a lot of back and forth? You don't have to go into great detail, but was that an easy decision or was that a hard decision in your opinion?
So the Pension Review Committee took a look at this in November, and we prepped it shortly thereafter to bring to a Levy Court meeting. The holidays tend to mess things up, and who knows if you've been interested in hearing about actuarial assumptions around the holidays. And that was followed on the heels of that, of course, was budget development, and then, of course, the COVID pandemic. So you're asking me to try to remember something that occurred quite a number of months ago. I guess we're coming up on a year, but my recollection was, and I could show you really what was a driver in their discussion, they really couldn't figure out why the change to the actual retirement would increase the cost by $182,000. They didn't get an adequate explanation of that. And perhaps they will get a good explanation, but at least in the discussion with the actuary, they didn't get that. So they were not comfortable moving forward with the extra $182,000 that would have cost. And the salary increases, really the same concept. They just weren't satisfied with what the actuary was using to come up with their recommendation, what they were basing it on. And maybe in some future assumption recommendation, they may recognize that. But that was what made the committee uncomfortable. They recognized right away that the mortality table needed to be updated. Apparently, government employees tend to live a bit longer than private sector employees. And that needs to be reflected in your study, or you'll never have enough money in your fund to pay for the benefits. And that's why they recommended. And the funding policy did increase it by $15,000, but they like the idea of reducing the amortization. And they never expect to come back and have it go all the way to zero, because it's probably not attainable, but at least down to maybe a 5, 10, or 15-year window, maybe even 20. But you'll probably see that, perhaps not you, President Banta, but that recommendation will come back to Levy Court in a few years. And I only say that, Mr. Banta, because you're intending to retire and use these benefits. So did that answer your question?
I like to get certain things on record for the simple reason of we pay a lot of money to have somebody provide the study, and then we, through the committee, so that when we get a recommendation, we don't do what a lot of jurisdictions have done, which is don't take the tough medicine, just go with the easy route and kick it down the road. So I like to rely on what's presented to me by the, quote, experts so that I can rely on what they've said to be a good decision. So that's why I asked the question. The last thing I'll say, how much do the employees pay for their retirement health care?
So if you are on Medicare and you're an employee, you do not pay any portion of that premium. So that's at 65. If you're under 65, you pay the same as a regular county employee, which right now is $85.04 per month.
Somewhat out of character with what the trends are, I guess. So my question is it sustainable, or is that what you just spoke to a minute ago, which is coming back?
Well, Commissioner, you may recall, I think earlier last year, maybe this year's budget, we have done study after study on how we may be able to mitigate some of the increasing costs of these contributions to the retiree benefits. That included, as you may recall, the sliding scale, closing the plant altogether, and all kinds of different things. I think we had 6 or 7 scenarios. And so those have been presented to the commissioners over the years, and certainly was, I think, this past spring. But it just has not received any traction. And so staff, I think, is well aware, in the pension review committee, that it's something the commissioners need to be considering, adopting some revisions to the eligibility for these benefits to be able to, sustain the contribution each year.
And obviously ask the question so that it's presented again in front of the commissioners, that I think that's something that we are kicking down the road. I know we are. So anyway, I'm done. Thank you.
Anybody else? Mr. Howe? Okay. Any questions? Okay. Well, a lot of information has been presented tonight. I think we need to review these 2 recommendations. And when does this have to be done?
So I think if it's if you make the final assumption decision, certainly by the end of the year it needs to be done. As you know, this is as of June 30th. They're working on that valuation. So they've gotten the census, they've got a lot of performance information, and ultimately they got to plug into the assumptions, whatever you either leave them the same or modify them, and they'll plug those into the formula to get your final report. So certainly before the end of the year.
Okay. With the decreasing amortization that has already been included in the 2018 OPEB valuation, I think we can just move forth to make this a valid report, just voting on that. Was that a good validation for moving forth?
Yes, at the very least, and I hope I emphasized that enough at the beginning, if we could get your agreement that you do want to change the amortization schedule, not only for the upcoming year, but for the study that was completed on June the 30th of 19. I think that way they know that needs to be included in whichever one they, if you choose not to go anyway, they know that anywhere that they do know that needs to be done. So that would be my recommendation if that's how you want to proceed.
Okay, I'm going to recommend that we move the decreasing amortization period beginning 30 years for the fiscal year ending 2019 forward to the business meeting for a vote. So can we have a show of hands to move to the business meeting? 7 up. Thank you, sir.
Commissioners.
Any public comments on this item? Any public comments? Mark, is there anybody online that may want to come? Star 1. Nope. Mr. President, back to you, sir.
Thank you, Mr. Angel. Next item under committee, under Public Works, Mr. Howe.
Thank you, Mr. President. Ms. Cope, come forward.
Good evening, Commissioners. So the first item on the agenda tonight is Houston Landfill O&M Plan Implementation, contract with O&M Inc. So the first page of the memo basically goes over the history of the landfill in terms of the environmental action that was taken by DNREC. It also gives a little bit of prior history to that. But basically, under the agreement with DNREC, there is a party of 11, there are 11 responsible parties in a group called the Houston Landfill Conservation Coalition. And there's a funding for the continued operation and maintenance of the landfill. There's also a plan required to maintain the landfill and monitor it. And basically at this point, what we're here before you tonight is to request that the contract with O&M Inc. be renewed. The cost of that contract is, for the next 3 years, is $25,672. Actually, did I pick up the wrong number? Excuse me, it's lower. That's the previous contract. It is lowered to $13,764.96. And the reason why it is lower is because the sampling required in the prior 3-year period is not required during this period. It's actually operating on a different cycle. So we've been successfully working with O&M Inc. and the Department of Public Works recommends that we continue that contract.
So basically, we're just talking about a contract renewal.
Correct.
Okay.
Except that it is not a renewal, it's actually a brand-new contract with the same
Okay.
entity.
All right, thank you. Any questions or comments? All in favor of this being the business item tonight? 6 up, item 2.
Item 2, North Aeration Basin Liner System Bid Award, American Coatings Technology, Inc. We have prepared bid documents and received bids. The bid opening was held on September 29th. The low bid was $398,782 from American Coating Technologies, Inc. American Coating Technologies, Inc. prepared the liner and installed it when we had a problem in 2017 with the South Aeration Basin. So we support the award of this contract to American Coating Technologies in the amount of $398,782. We'd be using sewer operating revenue from FY19, FY20, and FY21. It was a budgeted project.
Questions, comments? This is, you had a question? Mr.
Just a
President?
quick question. So, these liners, of course, are very critical to our entire system. Why do you think there's such a differential between American Coating and Cerrito Brothers?
I'm going to say it's the experience that ACT had because they did the prior work on our other liner. And their cost is actually a little bit lower than what the prior cost was. And again, I think that's based on what they know about our prior liner, the prior project that they did with us. They have that experience in the South Aeration Basin.
Okay, thank you.
Mrs. Sweeney?
Thanks, Commissioner House. So, Diana, American Coating did the South Basin?
Correct.
What was the difference? Do you remember?
It wasn't like, I want to say it was like 440,000, but that's off the top of my head.
So it's relatively close to what?
Relatively close, but a little bit less.
How long before they get that done?
Well, we have a small complication with a valve, and that valve will take about 16 weeks to come in and still has to be bid out. That complication wasn't brought up earlier, so that the danger is that if we don't have that valve working,
Right.
and the valve, we close the valve down, and it doesn't open back up again, we could be without a basin for a much longer period than planned. So we want to make sure that we've got a backup plan and we have that valve in place.
Good, thank you.
Any more questions? This is item 6 up, item 3.
Item 3, chemical contract for TheoGuard bid award. The Department of Public Works uses, I tend to call it TheoGuard, it's actually ThioGuard. We use a product which is a patent-protected formulation of magnesium hydroxide. It's similar to milk of magnesia. We use it for controlling hydrogen sulfide gas, which helps reduce odors if we can control the gas. And it also helps reduce pipe corrosion by providing a pH buffer. Because it is a proprietary product, we can't compare it to other pricing of other chemicals. So what we do is we tend to look at the other folks who are using the product and the pricing that they're getting. And I talked with Long Branch Sewer Authority in New Jersey, Town of Ocean City, Maryland, and City of Salisbury, obtained their pricing and doing a comparison for the pricing that we're looking at for the next 3 years. The pricing is listed, it's a different price for each of the 3 years, but it's comparative to the prices that are out there in the existing area. City of Salisbury has the lowest pricing, but their pricing was lined up in 2019. And you can see that the newer prices with in New Jersey, that they're higher and line up with ours, where ours would be in 3 years. So with that, we would like you all to award the contract to Premier Magnesia at the prices listed.
Any questions, comments? This is item tonight. 6 up, next item.
Route 13 main transmission, force main relocation for South Dover. DelDOT is in the design phase of the US Route 13 widening project from Punch and Run interchange to Lockme Way. They're also in the preliminary design of the Camden East and West Bypass project. So during that design process, we started looking at the utilities there, including the sewer lines owned by Kent County. There's approximately 11,000 feet, about 2 miles of pipe, of the 30-inch concrete pipe in the proposed project area for DelDOT. What we're looking at is that DelDOT priced relocating that 11,000 feet of pipe, certain areas of that limited relocation was $3.6 to $4 million. We had done a study of what it would cost with an estimate to relocate the 30-inch force main with new pipe outside of that area, and that cost of that project is $6 million to $7 million. We put out the idea that it's probably more preferred to do that new pipe, get a new pipe with another 50 years worth of life. DelDOT approached the county administrator and has been talking with us about, they understand that the preferred project is to relocate the full line, and they have offered to contribute the costs, the funds associated with the localized relocations to help support our project. Of course, we don't have that final agreement in hand, and tonight we're here with Levy Court to ask if you support that concept. And if you do support that concept, we would bring back an agreement to Levy Court for that to be signed. And I would like you to authorize me, the Public Works Director, to pursue the additional funding to complete the full project. Again, right now, we believe the estimate is $6 to $7 million, and potentially $3.6 to $4 million of that would be contributed by DelDOT.
Mr. Sweeney.
Thanks, Commissioner Howell. So Diana, this would move the force main from Punch and Run to Rising Sun Road?
Basically, it's from Punch and Run to Route 10.
To Route 10?
Route 10 near the Rising Sun area.
Okay.
So it's a combination of going behind, where Piccadilly is.
Right.
So it's a combination of running, and so it's a combination of a few easements are needed, and then there are some easements that we already have.
Right. So, there's still a lot of houses back there, and they're, building from the other subdivision, Fairfield Farms, infringing on that area too. So it's not going to be a disruption to those homes back there?
There's always a disruption when
Yeah.
there's construction. No one's ever necessarily in favor of seeing construction in their neighborhood. So I can't say that there would be no disruptions during construction.
Right.
But we would work with folks to make sure we're telling folks what is happening when we get to that point. At this point, we haven't completed the design and we don't have the funding. DelDOT is hoping to do their project in November of 2021. So
Okay.
we've got a very short period of time to make this all happen.
All right, so that
And-
gets it to Route 10, but from Route 10, you're not, it's just connecting up to Force Main and Route 10. We're not going down Rising Sun Road or,
That's where we're stopping at the moment.
okay, perfect, thank you.
Questions, comments? Mr. Buxton.
Really very simple. You've asked for our thoughts or opinions. You're not in opposition, correct?
No, I'm definitely in support of this idea that it gives us that opportunity to we have a pipe that's 50 years plus old. If we put in another pipe, we're getting a pipe, so we don't know the condition of that pipe. Based on what we saw between Pump Station 2 at Denny's Road and Pump Station 3 at Water Street, the reason why we did the slip lining, we're very concerned about the condition of this pipe for the entire length of it, and we've only slip lined a portion of it.
To be, so then my position is sure.
From my perspective, it makes sense.
Any other comments?
Just one question. So Camden's, Camden Wyoming Sewer and Water Authority comes out at the pump station there by Rodney Village. It attaches into this, correct?
I haven't seen the full alignment for how that is, but yes, you're correct. The pump station that Camden, Wyoming goes to is across from Rodney Village.
Right.
It's pump station 14.
Okay.
All right, no more questions, business item? 6 up. One more item, and this does not require a motion. It's good news, right?
It is very good news. So in December of 2019, the Route 13 slip lining project was completed, and we switched over from the bypass to the slip line, which was, we slip lined from Pump Station 2 Denny's Road to Garden Lane, across from Panera Bread. The flow was put back in the full line from Pump Station 2 at Denny's Road to Pump Station 3 at Water Street. And we had a leak at Silver Lake. So the good news tonight is to tell you that the repair work has been completed so that the entire line has been repaired, not necessarily fully slip line, but we've got a combination of the slip line and in the northern section, a combination of lining and replacing different sections of pipe so that that line is ready and operating and is functioning acceptably. So we're very glad that the project has worked out.
That's a good closing note. Any comments on that, folks? Mr. President?
Just one comment, Diana, you and your team and George and Lynch did an outstanding job in a year, and that was amazing, the amount of work that had to be done, and with no major confusion. I think that Del Dot worked well with us, and they put those Jersey barriers in. The job just is magnificent, the job that you all did, so we appreciate that. Thank you.
So there is a little bit of restoration that needs to be done, but the pipe is fully functioning. Thank you.
Very good. Appreciate that. We covered all of these items well enough. And if there are any public comments, including on the phone, it's time to speak up.
Anyone on the phone? Star 1, please. Mr. Chairman? No.
Seeing and hearing none, Mr. President, back to you.
Thank you, Mr. Howell. We will adjourn the committee meetings and now reconvene the business session. First item under business, Mr. Buxton.
Time out for a second.
You, sir, we got all night. Not a problem.
The motion presented during the business meeting, or I'm sorry, the committee meeting, the exact number reflected in my comments, I believe it was, I don't want to guess, it was a third of whatever the number was presented. So
120,600.
20,000, not 20,000.
120,600.
Guy's like an elephant over there, I'll tell you that. Make a motion that we allocate 120,600 600 back to the Delaware State Housing Authority for use with their assistance in the their homeless fight from the Community Development Funding Program.
Second motion.
Ready to move to the second of Mr. Buxton, Mr. Angel, to approve the motion as made by Mr. Buxton. Are there any questions on that motion? Seeing none, entertain a motion. Vote. Lorraine, please call the roll.
Mr. Angel?
Yes.
Mr. Buxton?
Yes.
Mr. Hall?
Yes.
Mr. Howell?
Yes.
Mr. Pepper, absent. Mr. Sweeney?
Yes.
Mr. Banta?
Yes.
Mr. President, roll call reveals 6 yeas, 1 absent.
Thank you, Lori. 6 affirmative votes approves the motion as made by Mr. Buxton. Next item, number 2, Mr. Buxton.
Mr. Commissioner Sweeney, would you like to read this into the record?
Thank you. I appreciate that, Commissioner Buxton. I move that the Levy Court accept responsibility for enforcing the county's property maintenance code within the town of Viola municipal boundary. The mayor or a member of council shall make all requests for individual enforcement services.
Okay.
Motion by Mr. Sweeney, second Mr. Buxton, to approve the motion as made by Mr. Sweeney. Any questions on that motion? Hearing none? Ms. Tanaka, please call the roll.
Mr. Angel?
Yes.
Mr. Buxton?
Yes.
Mr. Hall?
Yes.
Mr. Howell?
Yes.
Mr. Pepper, absent. Mr. Sweeney?
Yes.
Mr. Banta?
Yes.
Mr. President, roll call reveals 6 yeas, 1 absent.
Thank you, Lori. 6 affirmative votes approves the property maintenance code enforcement for Viola. Mr. Angel.
Thank you, Mr. President. Any further questions, gentlemen? I move to adjust the actuarial assumptions for the retiree benefits OPEB program and incorporate a decreasing amortization period that begins at 30 years for fiscal year 2019.
Second motion.
Motion by Mr. Angel, second Mr. Sweeney, to approve the OPEB assumption revision recommendations as prosaid by Mr. Angel. Any questions on that motion? Hearing none? Ms. Tanaka, please call the roll.
Mr. Angel?
Yes.
Mr. Buxton?
Yes.
Mr. Hall?
Yes.
Mr. Howell?
Yes.
Mr. Pepper, absent. Mr. Sweeney?
Yes.
Mr. Banta?
Yes.
Mr. President, roll call reveals 6 yeas, 1 absent.
Thank you, Lori. 6 affirmative votes approves the motion as so made. Mr. Howe.
Thank you, Mr. President. First of all, I want to move to award the contract for continued monitoring of the Houston landfill to O&M Incorporated and authorize the President of Levy Court to sign the contract.
Second.
Motion Mr. Howe, second Mr. Sweeney, to approve the Houston landfill O&M plan implementation. Any questions on that motion? Hearing none, Ms. Tanaka, please call the roll.
Mr. Angel?
Yes.
Mr. Buxton?
Yes.
Mr. Hall?
Yes.
Mr. Howell?
Yes.
Mr. Pepper, absent. Mr. Sweeney?
Yes.
Mr. Banta?
Yes.
Mr. President, roll call reveals 6 yeas, 1 absent.
Thank you, Lori. 6 affirmative votes approves the motion as so made. Mr. Howe.
Mr. President, I move to award the contract for 2020 North Aeration Basin Liner Project to American Coating Technology Incorporated in the amount of $398,782 using sewer operating revenue from FY 19, 20, and 21 sewer fund budgets, and authorize the President of Levy Court to sign the contract documents.
Second the motion.
Motion Mr. Howe, second Mr. Angel, to approve the motion as so made by Mr. Howe. Any questions on that motion? Seeing none? Ms. Tanaka.
Mr. Angel?
Yes.
Mr. Buxton?
Yes.
Mr. Hall?
Yes.
Mr. Howell?
Yes.
Mr. Pepper, absent. Mr. Sweeney?
Yes.
Mr. Banta?
Yes.
Mr. President, roll call reveals 6 yeas, 1 absent.
Thank you, Lori. 6 affirmative votes approves the motion as made. Next one. Mr. Howe.
Mr. President, I move to award the 3-year contract for supply of Thioguard chemical to Premier Magnesia LLC at the unit price per gallon for each respective year, and authorize the President of Levy Court to execute the contract. Funding shall be from the FY 21, 22, 23, and 24 sewer fund operating budgets.
Second.
By Mr. Howe, second Mr. Sweeney, to approve the motion as made by Mr. Howe. Any questions on that motion? Seeing none, Ms. Tanaka, please call the roll.
Mr. Angel?
Yes.
Mr. Buxton?
Yes.
Mr. Hall?
Yes.
Mr. Howell?
Yes.
Mr. Pepper, absent. Mr. Sweeney?
Yes.
Mr. Banta?
Yes.
Mr. President, roll call reveals 6 yeas, 1 absent.
6 affirmative votes approves the motion as made. Next item, Mr. Howe.
Thank you, Mr. President. Move to authorize a project concept for relocation of the 30 main transmission force main from Punch and Run to Rising Sun Road, which includes entering an agreement with DelDOT for project cost sharing, and move to authorize Public Works Director to pursue DNREC or other funding, including but not limited to application approvals and commitments for loans and grants related to the project.
Second.
Motion, Mr. Howe, second, Mr. Sweeney, to approve the Route 13 main transmission force main relocation. Any questions on that motion? Hearing none, Ms. Tanaka, please call the roll.
Mr. Angel?
Yes.
Mr. Buxton?
Yes.
Mr. Hall?
Yes.
Mr. Howell?
Yes.
Mr. Pepper, absent. Mr. Sweeney?
Yes.
Mr. Banta?
Yes.
Mr. President, roll call reveals 6 yeas, 1 absent.
6 affirmative votes approves the motion as made. Next item is simply an update. We've already gotten through that. Under other business, Mr. Buxton, you want to make that motion for executive session?
Well, Ms. Smalls, I'm down here hanging out with Mr. Angel. No, we're good. I will. I'll make a move. We go into executive session immediately following the committee meetings of Tuesday, October 20th, 2020. I like it. For preliminary discussion on site acquisition for a publicly funded capital improvement legal strategy session regarding collective bargaining and pending potential litigation and personnel matters pursuant to 29 Del C 10004 B2 4 and 9.
Second.
Okay, moved and seconded. Mr. Buxton and Mr. Sweeney, executive session October 20, 2020. Any questions on that motion? Hearing none, Ms. Tanaka, please call the roll.
Mr. Angel?
Yes.
Mr. Buxton?
Yes.
Mr. Hall?
Yes.
Mr. Howell?
Yes.
Mr. Pepper, absent. Mr. Sweeney?
Yes.
Mr. Banta?
Yes.
Mr. President, roll call reveals 6 yeas, 1 absent.
Thank you, Lori. 6 affirmative votes puts us to executive session October 20, 2020. Next item would be public comments. Any public comments, either in the audience or on the phone? No one's on the phone, no one's in the audience. Any comments? Any commissioner comments? Mr. Sweeney.
Thank you, President Banta. First of all, I want to thank leadership, President Banta, Commissioner Pepper, and the county administrator for moving the Viola property maintenance code covered to tonight from next week. This has been something we've been working on since early in April, and I'm glad to get it done. I've already texted Mr. Kiesling and Ms. Mizrandino and let them know that it's done, so we can move in there as soon as they have a property that needs our attention. Does this mean that we have next Tuesday night off?
Yes.
Good. Yeah, sorry, I knew you were gonna. So the second thing is, for most of you know that I have ink in my blood. My dad was in the Delaware State News and newspaper business and a teacher at Kent Votech as the printing and photography teacher for about 50 years. And I now have ink in my blood. I'm a published author and provided an article for the Modern Maturity Bulletin and for the Harvest Years newsletter on a monthly basis. So it'll be nonpartisan. It'll just be all about what Kent County Levy Courts are doing and all the good stuff we do. So look for it.
Good, thank you. Any other commissioner comments? County administrator, no comments? To entertain a motion to adjourn, we will have an executive session after this has already been approved by the previous meeting, so we'll go to executive session after we adjourn. Thank you. Motion to adjourn.
So moved.
Second.
Ready to move and seconded. Mr. Angel, Mr. Sweeney to adjourn. Any questions on that motion? Seeing none, Ms. Tanaka, please call.
Mr. Angel?
Yes.
Mr. Buxton?
Yes.
Mr. Hall?
Yes.
Mr. Howell?
Yes.
Mr. Pepper, absent. Mr. Sweeney?
Yes.
Mr. Banta?
Yes.
Mr. President, roll call reveals 6 yeas, 1 absent.
Thank you, Lori. 6 affirmative votes will move us into adjournment, and from then we'll go into executive session from which we will not be returning. Thank you. We are adjourned.
Conference recording has stopped.